Good morning. I'm really nervous. It's because it's my hometown crowd. I was born in Burns Lake, raised on the south side, graduated in this very room, maybe even in this spot, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I would have never imagined that this would be my life now. At the time, I wanted to be a chef. Fortunately or unfortunately, I did not pursue that dream. Instead, life happened, and in my life as a Wet'suwet'en woman, I've encountered many situations that the inequities of services for Indigenous people became obvious. I became obsessed with access to justice. And through my work as a mediator, I realized we don't need to fight for access to justice in the provincial or federal systems. We have our own systems, which are embedded in our culture, our communities, the Batlats, which many of our communities practice. I never thought that the Western legal processes delivered justice anyways for our people. So I switched my energy to focus on, as Mary says, breathing life into our own laws. To that end, as Mike mentioned, we are focusing on transforming dispute resolution into one based on our cultures, values, and principles. I'm grateful to be a part of Carissa County Family Services, where we are taking on the work together. My work as the Executive Director of Justice is both delivering programs, the Calls for Justice and Collaborative Practice, and developmental. Since last year, I have been part of developing our legal services, and I'm glad to see that its own department now. Our first hire was Lincoln as baby lawyer. And I'm sorry that our Chief Director of Legal Services, Kyle Parker or Naomi Findley, couldn't be with us today, but they are flourishing in their own department now. I'm a proud mom of that, I think. So we also have moved forward with the goal of building a child and youth advocacy center. Then we ended up having a setback, but now we're ready to move forward again. On collaborative practice, the supervisor and manager of traditional dispute resolution have been working together to move from the MCFD model of collaborative practice to our own system of traditional decision-making that empowers families and communities to come together and make plans for their own children and families. And I just want to say, I don't think I got the memo that we should have pictures of all of our staff, so I just want to make sure that I say their names so that they know that I'm not up here taking credit for their work. Kayla Steinbach and Jaylene Borden, Rhonda Crafta, Tyler Douglas, Adele Welsh, and Julia Haste are our collaborative practices and traditional decision-making team. And on Calls to Justice, we have Michelle Jones, Kelsey Spears, and Cassidy Shivera. That team I call small but mighty. And I wouldn't be remiss if I wouldn't mention Amal Arand, our youngest team member, also known as our office mom, and she's truly who helps keep me on track. So for Calls for Justice, you can see in the handbook the amazing and many projects that our small but mighty three-person team is working on. But one I'd like to highlight, and I'd actually like Mary TG to come join me for this, because it was her brainchild. We have a Hope and Strength red carpet event in Prince George on October 17th. If you would like to come, and you are invited to come, it's a free event, but you must register and get your ticket at Eventbrite so that we make sure that we have enough seats for everyone. And so before Mary talks about it, and she has so much more, this was her dream, and I'm super proud to be able to help make it come true, is that we're launching a series of short films or vignettes highlighting the lives and work of incredible Indigenous women. The purpose of this is to help combat the negative stereotypes of Indigenous women. Because as you all know, as an Indigenous woman, we are more likely, 7 times more likely, to be murdered or missing. And we need to change that. We need to change the hearts and minds of the people that we live with and around us, And I'm hoping that this, this project will do that. So thank you. Mary?
Thank you, Julie. Julie, given the workload that I had, it was really hard for me to let the Highway of Tears initiative go, but I actually didn't let it go. So what we did is that we worked collaboratively together, and then we have an advisory group at CSFS comprised of Indigenous leaders within the agency, people like Cheryl Thomas, Davina Volk, all of the Indigenous women come together and advise us how to do this work in a good way. This project that we're talking about, the Hope and Strength, is part of a broader national initiative. And so what happened years ago, as you know, we had the Highway of Tears, and we were always operating on a wing and a prayer. Although we got commitments from every level of government, they didn't always transpire to funding, and so we were forever doing proposals. So when the calls for justice came about, quite a few years ago, the then Minister Carolyn Bennett was getting a lot of flack because nothing was happening. There was a call for justice, and yet again, the worst thing happened was that it was another report up on the shelf. So she had asked me and reached out and said, Mary, I've heard, you guys have done great things in the Highway of Tears. It's a very active, so can you give us some advice? So I flew to Ottawa, I met with her, some of her ADMs, and I said, well, why don't you do what we did in the North, like the Highway of Tears? We have a governing body. We had every level of government there. We were able to really fulfill some of the recommendations of the Highway of Tears recommendations report. Why don't you do that nationally? And she goes, well, how would that look? And I said, don't worry, I'll get a proposal. So we did a proposal, and we got funded to do that work on a national level. And that initiative we're still working on because, of course, change in government, change in administration. They funded us the initial, but we're still waiting for a big chunk of money to do that work. And that work would be what we did is we have a toolkit for safety. We have mechanisms for awareness, all of this stuff in the North. If you know, so you've heard on the news, like we have that transportation, like again, that transportation plan where you have the $5 bus, that came from the lobbying and advocating from the Highway of Tears recommendations report. We're still working on that. We're still hoping that we're gonna get more sites into the feeder communities for that $5 bus. The driver's training program, that came from CSFS. That was a pilot. That's what we lobbied for. So all of these recommendations and the changes in the North came from what CSFS was doing as part of the Highway of Tears governing body. There's the Rogers, the cell service. That again comes from the Highway of Tears recommendations report. And that cell service that we have, we've just seen the first one. It has the big red dress on those big towers. Now, they thought it was going to be a couple of $1 million project. It ends up being this innovative project where there is new technology that they've had to use to have self-coverage in the whole North, and it's only here in British Columbia. It's nowhere else in the whole world. They're actually developing new technology, not only to get the cell towers to work in these remote places, but also how they are actually building these cell towers with the machinery and the helicopters. It's actually really interesting. So once we get that documentary on that, you'll see how exciting. So, kind of fast forward to all of this work that we, at the political level. So we got the funding, and so our national campaign, it's called Our Spirit. And this is gonna be a campaign to raise awareness and to really try to stop the violence against Indigenous women and LGBTQ plus people. So part of that, one of the things that I wanted was a compendium to the actual toolkit. I was asked by the minister at the time, now they're WADE, the Women and Gender Equality Ministry. They're saying that there was so much negative stereotypes in the media that they were seeing. And they monitor this, and they asked, do you have any idea how we could do this? So I said, well, why don't we attach to this national initiative some videos or something to show really strong women, that we're not just a number, we're just not a statistic, that we actually show women to give hope to our young women, but really to show mainstream society that we're not just a statistic, we're not just a number, that our lives actually matter. And that's where we came up with the Hope and Strength. So we looked at leaders across the country, and we're doing these little vignettes. And so it's really exciting. And so that's what we're going to be doing. So we'll be starting, I think, some of the media, I think a little bit, sort of a peek of what's happening, because today, October 4th, is the International Day of Gender Equality. Okay, anyways, I know what it is, it escapes me. Oh my goodness. Anyways, so that we're going to be showing these little vignettes, and then we're going to have this great opening on October 17th. And I just really want to commend, Julie, and especially Cassidy for, keeping up the work and keeping up the momentum. And then, but there's other things too that we're doing, again, first of its kind in Canada, and we got to start that political lobbying. So along the highway, you may have heard that we were going to be changing the highway name based on what the families wanted. And one of the names they came up with was the Highway of Hope. And that's why we have the Hope and Strength theme. It's going to be the whole way through the north. And so the minister at the time had agreed to change the name of the highway from Highway 16 Yellowhead Highway. Like seriously, we don't want the highway, Yellowhead Highway, named after a fur trader, a fur trapper. That's what the highway is named after. So the minister had agreed, and then because there was one person that disagreed, they put that on hold. But wouldn't it be great? So what we said is we could change the Highway of Tears at Yellowhead with the red Our Spirit logo along the highway, and the highway would be called Highway of Hope. So that's one huge thing we're trying to do, because again, it's to get away from that stigmatization that we're more than just a statistic. And I know that, we're 7 times more likely, just by virtue of being an Indigenous woman, to be killed or to go missing. But it needs to be top of people's minds when they're changing policies, laws, and if any companies that are out there and they're thinking of where should we give some money, like it's going to be top of their mind if they're along this highway. So there's a lot of work that we have to do, but I just really want to commend Julie and the team just for keeping on this wonderful work. And again, we don't get a lot of money. It's all through proposals. So the film vignette, we developed that proposal and we were successful. And we've been working with Wage, and it's quite substantial amount. And so the next section of the big chunk of money that we got is actually finally to have the Highway of Tears Symposium. In the recommendations report, it states that we should have an annual symposium, or at least every other year. We had the first symposium in 2006, which really spurred on this national movement, and then we haven't had one since. But we did finally we were successful, and so we will be having a northern, probably provincial-wide now, symposium, given the amount of money that we have. So that's exciting. So they're going to be really, really busy doing all that work. And again, thanks to Julie and the team.
Thank you, Mary. No, and I think, so check out, if you want to come, and you will want to come, these are amazing films. I know that there's already talk about submitting some for festivals and prizes, and you will really want to hear these stories. And who doesn't want an opportunity to walk the red carpet? So please come. So please come out. So that's my report. Any questions? And you might as well just stay. Yeah. Any questions?
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
The one thing too is that, so if people know that we put the Highway of Tears documentary now, it's free on YouTube, and within the first 36 hours we had 26,000 views. So that's internationally, so it is free now on YouTube.